The Stonecutters Ledger, a quiet drama production. In a town where names fade faster than headstones, one man begins to notice what's missing. A misplaced record, an unmarked grave, a ledger that shouldn't exist. They told him not to ask questions, not to count too closely, not to dig too deep. But once you see what's been buried, you can't forget it. Quiet Drama presents The Stonecutters Ledger. Chapter 1. Graves and Numbers. The town of Delgrave sat hunched against the base of two gray hills, like a forgotten thought, its buildings pressed close as though whispering secrets to one another. It was a place of still routines and long memories, of names that had been carved into signs, doors, and tombstones for generations. When Hollis Trent arrived by coach on a gusty November morning, he was greeted by a clerk with eyes as pale as wet ash and hands that seemed permanently ink-stained.
"You'll be in the records office, near the west gate,"
the man had said, not looking up.
"Cemetery's part of your duty now. Every 5 years, they try to get it in order."
The municipal clerkship was not what Hollis had envisioned when he left the city, degree in hand, full of promise and moral fire. But after 3 positions in 2 cities that had both dissolved into disappointment, he accepted Delgrave's offer. A quiet town, a ledger to balance, some time to recenter. The cemetery records were kept in a one-room office attached to the back of the caretaker's cottage, a squat, mildew-slick building whose windows had been painted shut decades ago. A pot-bellied stove creaked in the corner, rusted and cold. It took Hollis 2 days to scrub the place into working order and 3 more to sort the moldering stacks of disorganized parchment, books, and bundled receipts into something approximating coherence. By the end of the first week, the numbers weren't adding up. At first, it was small things, plot numbers with missing corresponding names, a burial date scrawled with 2 different hands. One headstone in the field read Elias Rowe, 1861 to 1913, but the official death register listed him as having died in 1909. There were 6 unmarked plots listed as occupied in the ledger, but no physical stones or markers above them. Hollis triple-checked each figure, each name, with growing unease. One evening, after dusk had swept through the town like an apology, Hollis wandered through the graveyard with a lantern in hand. The graveyard sloped down a gentle hill and then flattened into a clearing of tall grass and white stones, many now slanted or overtaken by moss. The wind hissed through the grass like breath through teeth, and there by the tree line, working alone beneath a flickering oil lamp, was the stonecutter. He was tall and impossibly thin, draped in a long leather apron that hung from his shoulders like a butcher's smock. His arms, ropey with age and toil, moved with mechanical precision. With each strike of his chisel, a faint spark leapt, and a dry scraping echoed across the cold evening air.
"Evening,"
Hollis called. The man did not respond. He did not look up. A woman from the village, Mrs. Cairn, the baker's wife, had told Hollis the man's name was Bram, though no one seemed to know his surname. She'd called him Old Bram with a curious tone, as though the man had always been there, carving names into stone before any of them had been born.
"He don't talk, far as I know,"
she'd said, dusting her hands on her apron.
"Not since the plague took his boy. Keeps to the shadows now. But he works. Oh yes, always works."
Over the next week, Hollis tried to ignore the uneven columns of data, the mismatched names, the impossibly wide spacing between dates of death and burial. One entry listed a man as buried before his recorded death. Another name had been crossed out entirely in red ink with no note. When he asked around the town office, no one seemed particularly interested in correcting the mistakes.
"They're just old records,"
said a sour-faced alderman.
"What's it matter? The dead don't care."
But Hollis cared. He'd always believed that records mattered, that there was dignity in keeping the truth accounted for, even if no one else read it. In the quiet hours between tasks, he began investigating the oldest entries, cross-referencing town census logs, family names, property records. And it was then, late one night as wind slapped against the window panes and the stove groaned with fire, that he found it. The floorboard beneath the desk had a hairline split, just enough for a bit of air to whisper through. He pried it up with a rusted trowel, and in the shallow gap beneath found a leather-bound book, brittle at the edges, wrapped in a strip of canvas. The pages inside were yellowed but neatly written, unmistakably the hand of a practiced ledger keeper. Each page held names, dates, and grave numbers, but none of them appeared in the town's official register. At the top of the first page, written in faded ink, were the words, "For those not seen, but buried still." A chill crept over Hollis that had nothing to do with the wind. The names, they kept going. Dozens, then scores, many with no last names, some labeled only with a dash. Children's first names with no parents listed. A few had a single note beside them: pauper, accident, debtor, no kin. Hollis turned the last page and found a final note, scrawled in a different hand: no stone, no sound, but marked. The next morning he asked around quietly about pauper burials, unmarked graves, and whether there had been any system in place in the previous century to handle those without families. The responses were either shrugs or side-eyed warnings to leave well enough alone. One old man behind the post office simply said,
"You don't walk too far into the old rows, son. The grass there don't bend right."
Still, Hollis walked the rows. He counted out the plots listed in the secret ledger and found most aligned to real, physical spaces. One had a stump in place of a stone. Another had a rusted shovel lying half buried nearby. A third was sunken. The ground slightly collapsed inward, like a lung exhaling. In each of these spaces, there was no official record, but someone had been placed there. Someone had dug, buried, covered. Someone had kept a private record. At sunset, Hollis returned to the Stonecutters' shed. Bram was there, silently chiseling a new name into a slab of pale granite. His hands did not falter as Hollis stepped closer.
This name
Hollis said, pointing to the fresh carving.
isn't in the public record.
Bram paused. His hand hovered over the chisel. Then, without looking up, he placed his tools down, delicately, like instruments. He turned, opened the door to his small shack, and disappeared inside without a word. Left in the dimming light, Hollis stared at the new name. Jonas Ward, 1901 to 19. It was written in the secret ledger. Chapter 2. The Silent Tradesman. The mornings in Delgrave came slow and gray, as though the sun had to be coaxed over the hills. Hollis sat at his desk in the cemetery office, the secret ledger open before him. He had spent most of the night transcribing its entries into a private notebook, afraid to remove the original from its hiding place. The names haunted him, not because they were ghosts, but because they had been deliberately forgotten. He began his day not with ledgers, but with grave counting. One by one, he walked the rows of the cemetery, cross-referencing names from the hidden ledger with physical plots. Most were crude, worn-down stones or none at all. A few had makeshift wooden crosses, long since rotted. Others had only stones, a pile here, a small marker there, things easy to overlook. By noon, he had confirmed at least 32 graves not accounted for in the official town records. Several had burial dates during a time when, according to the public logs, no interments occurred due to budget restrictions. In town, he asked more questions. He learned to keep them oblique. At the grocer, he inquired about the history of town services, burial funds, pauper relief, emergency burials. The grocer, a stout man with an upper lip of permanent perspiration, offered a shrug.
Back in the day, folk had to settle debts fast. Dying was expensive. If you couldn't afford the plot, you went quiet, always away.
And who arranged it?
Hollis asked.
The man scratched his chin. Usually a family member, or the church. Sometimes the council.
Who dug the graves?
That made the grocer pause.
Why, Bram, I suppose. Always been Bram.
Always Bram. Always there. Always carving, digging, sealing. That evening, Hollis returned to the cemetery. As expected, old Bram was working, his hammer rhythm slow and deliberate. Hollis approached cautiously, the notebook in hand.
I found something,
He said. A ledger, with names. Names that don't appear anywhere else. Bram kept chiseling.
I think you wrote them. Or someone you knew. They match the stones out here. Stones with no family names, no records.
The old man stopped. The chisel rested in his hand like a sleeping animal. Why weren't they recorded? Hollis pressed.
Who decided they didn't matter?
Bram turned his eyes toward him, not angry, just tired. Deep lines ran from his brows to his jaw, as if his skull had been eroded by years of wind and grief. He looked down at the slab he'd been working on, then back at Hollis. Without a word, he walked to the side of his shed, reached beneath a stack of slate, and pulled out a worn, cloth-wrapped bundle. He handed it to Hollis. Inside were drawings, symbols, sketches, notations, circles carved in rows, ledger layouts, a series of unusual marks etched beside certain names, tiny triangles, slashes, and dots.
These are the same marks carved on some of the headstones,
Hollis whispered.
What do they mean?
Bram pointed to one of the marks, a small triangle with a line through it. Below, scribbled faintly, were the words, paid in flesh. Disturbed and unable to sleep, Hollis returned to the ledger the next day. A pattern emerged. Names with symbols often came in clusters, several buried in the same week. Occasionally, a name was followed by a notation. Debtor, sentenced, child of infraction. It read more like an accounting of obligations than a record of the dead. He visited Mrs. Cairn, the baker's wife, again. Over tea, he asked carefully if she remembered a boy named Jonas Ward. She furrowed her brow.
That name? No, can't say I do. But there was a family by that name. Didn't last long here. Something about a theft, I think. Small thing. Bread, maybe. There was a scandal. Quieted down fast.
Would the council have punished him?
For bread? Unless. Well, things were different then. If a family couldn't pay a fine, someone might take their place. An old kind of law. One person dies so the rest can stay.
She smiled apologetically.
That's all rumor, of course. Old Delgrave stories. Best not to pull at them.
Hollis returned to the cemetery, heart pounding, coat pulled high against the cold. The wind bit harder than before. Even the stones looked frostbitten. That night, a second grave appeared, newly dug. The soil still dark and wet, like open flesh. No marker. Hollis ran his fingers through his hair, pacing. He checked the records. No one had died. No one had even been ill. This wasn't maintenance. It was a message. Later that evening, he walked to old Bram's shack, armed with nothing but questions.
I'm not afraid.
Hollis said, stepping through the door uninvited.
I'm not part of your game.
Bram didn't answer. He simply turned and pointed to the far wall. There, mounted above a row of old carving tools, hung a single slate tablet, unmarked but prepared, freshly cut, smooth, ready.
Is that for me?
Hollis asked. Bram nodded once.
You think I'll let them bury me here? That I'll go quietly into one of your nameless holes?
No answer. Just the silent hush of tools and dust. Hollis moved closer. Beneath the workbench, tucked between two larger slabs, he saw something strange. A stack of rejected headstones, each carved and then scratched out. Lines blurred, names half erased. He pulled one free.
Victor Hanley, 1898 to 1915.
Another, Elena Marsh, 1903 to 1921. Neither name appeared in the official records, but both were in the secret ledger. They had been prepared, forgotten, and rewritten, as though the town's ledger and Bram's chisel had final say over life. That afternoon, Alderman Ketter came to see him. Hollis was in the office, sitting calmly behind his desk. The alderman didn't knock. He simply walked in, removed his gloves, and took a seat across from him.
This doesn't have to be dramatic,
Ketter said, brushing specks of dust from his lapel.
We gave you a chance to walk away quietly. You mean to bury me quietly?
Ketter didn't blink.
This town survives by discretion. There's no newspaper, no hungry lawyers. People come here to end things, not to stir them. You're a murderer. Hardly, I'm a caretaker. You'd be amazed how many people come to us to be forgotten. And those who don't. Well, even they find peace, eventually.
Hollis stood.
I'm leaving this town tomorrow. The road's clear now. My report is written. The ledger is safe. If anything happens to me, it'll surface.
Ketter smiled.
Then I suppose we'll have to let you go.
For a moment, Hollis didn't trust what he heard.
But remember this,
Ketter said, standing.
Delgrave isn't just a town. It's a decision, one every resident makes. And even if you walk away, some part of you stays here, in the soil, in the names.
He tapped a long finger on the desk.
We all settle accounts, Mr. Trent, one way or another.
That night, Hollis returned to the graveyard. His notebook was gone, stolen from the office. But the secret ledger remained, still hidden beneath the floorboards. The wind whispered through the stones as he stood beneath the stars, unsure what to do. He thought about the ledger, about the 32 forgotten graves, about Jonas Ward. A light flickered in the Stonecutters' shed. Inside, Bram sat at his bench, his chisel in hand. He turned as Hollis entered. And then, for the first time in over 20 years, he spoke.
Your place is ready.
Chapter 3. We all settle accounts. For a long time, Hollis said nothing. The words, "Your place is ready," hung in the air like dust after a stone is struck, too soft to echo, too heavy to vanish. Old Bram had already turned back to his work. His hands moved with a practiced solemnity, tapping his chisel against an uncut stone slab with quiet deliberation. Hollis stepped inside the shed. It smelled of limestone dust, lamp oil, and something else. Earthier, decay, not rot, not fresh, just the scent of something long buried.
Was that a threat?
Hollis asked. Bram didn't answer.
Or a warning?
Still, no reply. Bram never looked up again. Outside, the wind scratched against the walls like nails seeking entry. Hollis backed out of the shed, unsettled and furious in equal measure. The narrow lantern he carried cast long shadows across the uneven graves. Some tilted toward him like curious heads. Others seemed to turn away, disinterested in his fate. He returned to the office and sat in the dark. His notebook was gone, taken, just as the alderman had promised. He opened the hidden floorboard and pulled out the original ledger, weighing it in his hands like a relic. Inside were all the names, all the secrets, all the silences. There was a moment, brief, foolish, when he considered burning it, to be free of it all. But no, that would be their victory. He wrapped the ledger in waxed cloth, sealed it tight, and placed it inside his traveling trunk beneath his clothes. If he couldn't act now, he would wait. Take it to the city. Find someone who would listen. Someone outside Delgrave. If he could leave. He tried the next day, wrote a resignation letter, polite and vague, packed his belongings into 2 small trunks, went to the coach depot at first light. No coaches ran that day.
Axle snapped on the hill,
the driver told him, chewing a sliver of wood between his teeth.
Should be fixed tomorrow.
Can I walk out to the next town? Brookvale?
The man laughed.
Not in this weather. Rivers are up, paths washed out.
Train then?
Tracks under repair past the quarry. You're a few days stuck, I'd say.
Stuck. He returned to the cemetery, stomach tight, coat pulled high against the cold. The wind bit harder than before. Even the stones looked frostbitten. That night, a second grave appeared. Newly dug, the soil still dark and wet, like open flesh. No marker. Hollis ran his fingers through his hair, pacing. He checked the records. No one had died. No one had even been ill. This wasn't maintenance. It was a message. Later that evening, he walked to old Bram's shack, armed with nothing but questions.
I'm not afraid, Hollis said, stepping through the door uninvited. I'm not part of your game.
Bram didn't answer. He simply turned and pointed to the far wall. There, mounted above a row of old carving tools, hung a single slate tablet, unmarked but prepared, freshly cut, smooth, ready.
Is that for me?
Hollis asked. Bram nodded once.
You think I'll let them bury me here? That I'll go quietly into one of your nameless holes?
No answer, just the silent hush of tools and dust. Hollis moved closer. Beneath the workbench, tucked between two larger slabs, he saw something strange, a stack of rejected headstones, each carved and then scratched out, lines blurred, names half erased. He pulled one free. Victor Hanley, 1898 to 1915. Another, Elena Marsh, 1903 to 1921. Neither name appeared in the official records, but both were in the secret ledger. They had been prepared, forgotten, and rewritten, as though the town's ledger and Bram's chisel had final say over life. He broke into the church archives through a cellar window beneath the vestry. In the cabinet at the back, beneath layers of dust, he found burial records kept by clergy before the council had taken control. There were names matching the secret ledger, dozens, but after a certain year, 1911, the records stopped. The final entry was a single line. By order of the council, the keeping of private burial entries is to cease. All dead will be accounted by the town. Stamped E. H. Ketter, Chair of Delgrave Council. It was proof, a line of corruption going back over a decade. He copied the page by hand and hid it with the ledger. In the morning, he awoke to find a note tacked to the office door. Your plot awaits. One more page to turn. Let it be the last. Chi, and below it, a symbol etched in charcoal, a triangle with a line through it. The same mark Bram had pointed to before. Paid in flesh. That afternoon, Alderman Ketter came to see him. Hollis was in the office, sitting calmly behind his desk. The alderman didn't knock. He simply walked in, removed his gloves, and took a seat across from him.
This doesn't have to be dramatic,
Ketter said, brushing specks of dust from his lapel.
We gave you a chance to walk away quietly.
You mean to bury me quietly?
Ketter didn't blink.
This town survives by discretion. There's no newspaper, no hungry lawyers. People come here to end things, not to stir them.
You're a murderer.
Hardly. I'm a caretaker. You'd be amazed how many people come to us to be forgotten. And those who don't? Well, even they find peace, eventually.
I'm leaving this town tomorrow, Hollis said. The road's clear now. My report is written. The ledger is safe. If anything happens to me, it'll surface.
Ketter smiled.
Then I suppose we'll have to let you go.
For a moment, Hollis didn't trust what he heard.
But remember this,
Ketter said, standing.
Delgrave isn't just a town, it's a decision. One every resident makes. And even if you walk away, some part of you stays here, in the soil, in the names.
He tapped a long finger on the desk.
We all settle accounts, Mr. Trent, one way or another.
He left the next day, and the coach came. The road was passable. No hands reached out from the ground. No threats, no pursuit. But as the hills swallowed the town behind him, he kept one hand on the satchel beside him, the ledger inside it like a living thing. Weeks later, he tried to publish what he'd found. First to the provincial newspaper, then a historical society, then a legal bureau. No one responded. The ledger disappeared in the mail, never delivered. The church record, hand-copied, was deemed inconclusive. No arrests were made, no inquiries followed. Delgrave, he came to understand, was a place built to disappear things, and that included truth. Years later, Hollis received a package. No return address. Inside was a blank headstone and a small note. We kept your place just in case. Be final image. Somewhere outside Delgrave, down a forgotten path, in a plot not marked on any map, a single grave rests. No name, no stone, but marked.